in almost all facets of our lives during and beyond the pandemic. From remote work to telehealth to online education and online shopping, digital technology has allowed us to continue some normalcy in our lives despite mobility restrictions and lockdowns during the COVID-19. The report also covers an important sub-region, Southeast Asia, which is one of the most dynamic regions in Asia Pacific. Based on gross market value, the digital economy in Southeast Asia has been growing rapidly from about 32 billion in 2015 to about 100 billion US dollars in 2020. ASEAN and Southeast Asia have already produced several unicorns, namely Grab, Gojek, Traveloka, Tokopedia, VNG, Bukalapak, and Lazada. However, while this increased adoption has brought many tangible benefits to businesses, consumers, and workers alike, there are many risks and challenges associated with the rising digital economy. For example, work from home has emerged as a new normal during the pandemic, but it has also exposed the vulnerabilities of the working poor who cannot work from home. Those who cannot work from home have been subject to losses of jobs and incomes. In Asia, especially, 7 out of 10 workers are in informal sectors, not having access to social and employment protections, aggravating their situation during the pandemic. In education, remote learning has become an essential part of the response to COVID-19 in nearly all 149 economies surveyed by World Bank. While 60% of this relies solely on online solutions, nearly half of the students in developing countries do not have access to internet at home. With the advent of digital era, the rise of digital platforms is also rapidly transforming the world of work and employment arrangements between platforms and the workers. In the Philippines, more recently, some changes in wage arrangements has also been some disruptions from disgruntled foodpanda drivers. These are just some of the challenges that have been raising concern for many. Therefore, I'm very happy that we have with us today Mr. Nuno Carrillo Neves, who is a regional head of strategy, insights, and data for Southeast Asia. He will present the report 2020, the e-Conomy of Southeast Asia, and show us a glimpse of what our digital future would look like in the region. After the presentation, a panel discussion will follow, which will be moderated by James Villaforte, our senior economist and the host of this webinar. Thank you. I'll turn to the presentation.
Good morning, everyone. I think I'm on, no? Good morning, everyone. I'm not sure if, okay. Now I'm on. Good morning, everyone. I'm very excited and happy to be here today. Thank you so much for your kind invitation. As you mentioned, I'm Nuno. I'm leading the data and insights at Google. And I'm really excited about the new wave of opportunities that digital brings to us. I will try to explain what this means. I will share the key message with you, and I will try to give you how we create this report. The first, next slide, please. As we mentioned, this is the 5th edition of the report. This year, actually, our focus and our title is At the Full Velocity, Resilient and Racing Ahead. And we will unbundle why we call this and why we see so many opportunities to capture in this environment today. The next slide explains how or what is our methodology in order to capture all the information and bring the insights to life. First, we use Google Trends, Temasek Insights, Bain analysis, primary research. This year we include this chapter and analysis that with Kantar. And the third and the last one, what we do is having experts interviews in industry source in order to understand what is the quality information about all the aspects of the economy in digital. And we partner with a lot of key people, key institutions as well. Apani, East Ventures, Golden Ventures, Monk Hill, Open Space, Vertex, and Wavemaker. The next slide, please. So, what is our coverage in this report? And actually, it's 5 sectors. That is e-commerce, transport and food, online travel, online media, and financial services. For the GMV, actually, what we have is the e-commerce, transports, travel, and media. And as we did in last year, we separate financial service in this analysis, and you will see that is the GMV and the financial service, digital financial service. And this year we include 2 new sectors, and mainly because we saw that our nation sectors that are rapidly accelerating. So we have quality information in order to see what is going on and what is the phenomenon in these key sectors. So now I would like to share the key message of the report in the next 2 slides. So the first one, and I start saying I'm excited about the new wave of opportunities that digital bring to us. And I would really like to explain what I mean with this. The first one is digital technology is the center of the stage. With 14 million new users on the internet in the region this year, the adoption has accelerated as well, with 1 in 3 are new digital consumers, and also the SMEs are moving in this direction as well. Another important figure and behavior is that 90% of the consumers intend to have the same behavior after the post-pandemic. The next area that I think that is exciting and give us a lot of positive sentiment is looking to our complex context today. The internet economy remains resilient by hitting $100 billion on GMV and also projects $300 billion for 2025. When we look this, what it changed really was the mix. The mix has changed. Why? We know that normally now we use much more e-commerce. There is restrictions in terms of travel. So in terms of the positive sectors, in terms of adoption is e-commerce, online media, and food and beverage. These sectors in reality have a huge, and online travel for the context has a significant, that is not new. But in reality, even with this challenge, what we see is a very positive movement and an increase in 5% year over year. We also see a positive sentiment from the consumers. We ask, what is the relation between the technology during this pandemic, COVID? And what was the answer was that in reality, the technology has helped and was very helpful during this pandemic. And this gives a very positive relation. Everyone is using much more time as well on the internet and essentially on accessing essential goods, healthcare, education, entertainment, and helping business as well. The business now are transforming and going more and accelerating for digital. Can we move to the next slide, please? The other point is that the market remains healthy. with the platforms refocusing on their core business and prioritizing the path of profitability, with an increase of internet penetration to 70%. There is still a robust opportunity when we compare to other markets like UK or Japan with 90% of the penetration. So what we see a lot of space of growth. We see also that the sectors of the platforms are now more refocusing on their core business and prioritizing the core and the profits. The new frontiers, as I mentioned, health tech and tech have played a critical role during the pandemic with the impressive adoptions that actually, when we look to the adoptions of these sectors, healthcare has 4x the adoption and tech 3x. So the consumers and the users actually are using much more this technology in order to overcome the challenge that we face today. At the same time, when we look to the area of investment, in reality, the title is Caution Optimistic, and I like this title because in reality it gives the right sentiment. The deal activity across the region continues to grow, and there is a strong fundamentals and dry power. What I mean with dry power is the capacity to invest in and the capacity to have funds to invest in the new generation of startups. In reality, there is indicators that we see a strong dry power, strong fundamentals of the digital economy, but the investors are looking to a sustainable and profitable growth. So they look to environment and they are trying to select correctly accordingly to this new environment as well. What is ahead? And I think that, and we will expand much more about this, but there are normally if we look to the past reports, when we launched in the first time this report, we identified 6 main drivers that block the potential of digital economy. And today what we see is a strong progress across almost every aspect of we identified. The first one, on internet access, we have come a long way with 70% of internet penetration in the region. The second area is the consumer trust. In reality, as I mentioned before, 1 of 3 are new digital consumers and 94% intend to stay. The third dimension is payments. There is also huge progress in this area. The cash transactions actually decline and e-wallet increase. The funding aspect, actually, the deal activity is growing, as I mentioned before, and there is a robust dry power and a lot of resources to invest. Now, there is 2 drivers with less progress. Logistic, even with the acceleration of e-commerce, in reality, there is opportunity to work on the delivery, especially in rural areas. The study gives us that in that specific areas, we need to work more and on the delivery, how the goods and our delivery is an important aspect for the consumers and users. But we need to work together on talent. And I think that with the demand of the jobs that the digital economy is creating, we need to reskill, upskill the people in order to match this new demand. These are the key elements that I think that is very important to mention. Now I will try to unbundle a little bit more in more detail the next slides, and if I may. Slide to digital. Yes, as I mentioned, today there is 40 million new users on internet, represents 70% of the population. And I think that is when we look to this, we still think that there is a lot of opportunity, as I mentioned, with the mature markets like UK, Japan with 90%. So there is a long headroom to increase, but we have done an amazing job on the penetration. The next slide, what means in addition to the new online users, COVID led to an acceleration of digital consumption as the users are trying the first time this service. So, and this is a critical new paradigm, I will say, that transform very how we see the digital economy. 1 in 3 digital service consumers are starting using this service due to COVID-19. What this means, and I will unbundle this concept that in the next slide. This means that I will pick a sector. In reality, electronics, 34% of the consumers of this category are new to this category. This means that people not only are new users, but they are new consumers to this category. And this means that we need to serve these consumers. When we look to these other categories that have a much more impact and a huge transformation, is education. 55% are new consumers. Loan, groceries. I give you my personal example in this one. I normally go to the offline retailers normally, and this pandemic changed completely my consumer behavior. Now I do almost 95% of my shopping and groceries online, and honestly, I intend to maintain this habit. Much more efficient, much more quickly, and the delivery has been amazing, this service. And now the third category that has a huge impact as well in terms of consumers, new consumers, is loans. 44% are new consumers that are consuming this service. So the next slide, please. And this trend in reality is across all the markets. Even in Singapore, for example, that is a mature market in terms of digital penetration, 30% are new digital consumers. So what this means that across all the countries, we see this effect. We see that the new consumers are coming to use these categories, and they want to maintain these habits as well. Could you pass to the next one? We try to understand also where the digital consumers are coming from. And Vietnam and Thailand, the majority are from the metro region. Indonesia, Malaysia, and Philippines are from no metro regions. The next one, please. The question that I think that is critical to answer is always they will stay or not? This is an element of stickiness or not? And in reality, 94% of the new digital consumers intend to maintain this service post-pandemic. And this means that there is a change of habits in the long term. And this has implications for the business, has implications how we will serve this new generation of consumers in our business. Next, please. The effect is similar across all the countries. So if we look to Philippines, it's 95%, but in the average of Southeast Asia is 94%. And all the countries have the same similar patterns around the intent of maintaining these consumer habits for the future. Let's move to the next slides, please. So now, as I explained, looking to the new context, could we go to the next slide? The next one. The next one. Looking to the context that we spoke in the introduction, in terms of the economy, we see today's context is complex. No, across all the countries, we see this acceleration in terms of economy. Only Vietnam and China has a positive GDP increase. So when we look to the digital economy, we need to understand this context as well. So the next slide what we have is that in reality, there is an increase of 5% in terms of estimation for this year. We are saying that it is $105 billion in GMV, and we project grow 24% growth year over year for the next 5 years. This is impressive. Why it is impressive? Looking to the context, we see that digital economy maintains growing and maintains accelerating. But how is possible? Mainly driven by e-commerce, and it's important to this concept. E-commerce doesn't mean only platforms, marketplaces. It means that a company, for example, is selling B2C, or a brand is selling online as well. So it's not only markets. And the drive that e-commerce makes is a huge acceleration, and we will talk a little bit more about that acceleration as well. The next slide, please. So when we look to the panorama here in terms of countries, Vietnam and Indonesia still with a double digit growing. Philippines very robust as well, 6% year over year, and 30% the next 5 years. It's a very strong and robust growth. And when we look only the situation is Singapore here, mainly because of, if we take out the effects of traveling reality, Singapore was increasing 20% and maintains being an important hub in terms of technology as well. The next, please. So here I think that is important to understand what is the effects and the mix between the sectors. We see very clear that e-commerce is the strong and is the driver of growth, online media as well, and food and transports, the effects are negative, mainly due to the rail hailing, because transport the food is increasing. And when we look to online travel, I think that we know why, everyone knows why there is this effect. The effect is mainly due to the context, but we anticipate that in the next 5 years they will maintain and will grow. The demand is here, so after solving these situations, they will capture the opportunity and will maintain growing. So key message here: e-commerce is clear, amazing this year. 63% of growth, exponentially, almost $62 billion for projected for this year. The next slide, please. So I will try to accelerate a little bit more. In terms of cautions, I will give you a little bit overview. What is the key messages in terms of investors? What they are looking for? They are more selective, for sure. Everyone is more selective. They are much more focused on the growth metrics and sustainability profits. And we look, but at the same time, in the next slide, what we assist is that there is a positive growth in terms of deals. Number of transactions are increasing. What is decreased is the funding of unicorns, mainly because there was a positive effect in 2018 investing in unicorns, and they are decreasing that effect now, and they are concentrating. In the next slide, we see the deals are now more concentrating in the series seed, series A and B. This makes more around 95% are these transactions. The next slide, please. And there is a concept behind, and we see that now there is also the investors are trying to have a much more diversity in terms of the sectors and the portfolio. So they are investing in new sectors like fintech, health tech, edutech, in order to have a portfolio more diverse. Next, please. As I mentioned at the beginning, and there is a dry power. So what this means that we have funds, $11.9 billion to invest in the next cycles. This is a very robust dry power, so the investors remain cautious, but with the ample capacity to activate the deals that are important to them and matched with their strategy. Next, please. So now to give you a little bit more the country view. Philippines. 35%, as I mentioned, new consumers on internet. This is an important figure. It's important that we are seeing that they are new digital consumers in new categories. It's a very robust number. 95% they want to maintain this after. And when we look to the effects of the pandemic, actually Philippines increased the average hours spent per day in personal use during the lockdowns, 5.2, and after 4.9 hours. Next, please. In terms of internet in Philippines, we have estimated 7.5 billion on GMV, an increase year over year of 6%, and we project an increase of 30%. How this is split and what is the drivers of this growth? The next slide. The drivers are mainly e-commerce. E-commerce in reality is projecting for this year a very positive growth, 55%. Transports and online travel, as I mentioned, with the challenge sectors, but they will overcome in the next years. We anticipate that the demand in terms of travel, domestic and international, will have positive effects in the next years. And when we look to online media that include streaming video, music, all these sectors, subsectors, has had a strong growth as well. Next, please. And in terms of funding, in reality, in terms of value and transactions, we see very positive movements and grow as well. So look to the history of and headlines of Philippines, very strong digital economy, healthy funding as well, activity, robust sectors to maintain this activity. This is the key message that I would like to share. I don't know if I have 1 or 2 minutes to conclude in the next slides. So recap very quickly. We spoke about a lot of things, but one key message is that the new wave of opportunities that digital bring to us will bring us a lot of opportunities across the markets from the demand side and supply sides. Demand sides, the consumers are here, and the supply sides, the positive effects of the SMEs and all the companies are coming to digital will have a positive effect in the long term as well. In terms of the next slide, the key areas that we spoke in terms of the drivers, as I mentioned, 4 have a strong progress: internet access, consumer trust, funding, and payments. Very positive progress. Logistics, we need to work on that in terms of delivery, as I mentioned before. And talent, I think that is an area that we need to work together in order to create the skill sets that are shorter now because of the demand of the jobs that we are creating in this area. Again, thank you so much for the invitation, and I hope that we share the key message to everyone.
Thank you, Nono, for a very comprehensive presentation, full of facts and very good outlook. So it seems that we will really expect digital economy to really contribute to Southeast Asia even after the pandemic. Now let me go and introduce our esteemed panelists who will actually provide their feedback and contribute to the discussion about this topic of economy for Southeast Asia in 2020. So as I call the panelists, please turn on your video so that our audience can actually see you. Our first panelist is Thomas Abel. Thomas is the chief of ADB's Digital Technology for Development Unit. Thomas has over 30 years of professional experience in digital technology, including technology policy and strategy, software development and systems architecture. He has also authored many books on technology innovation and development. Thank you, Thomas. Our next panelist is Dr. Celia Reyes. Celia is the first woman president of the Philippine Institute for Development Studies. Celia specializes in econometrics and has been a network leader of the community-based monitoring system, which provides free technical assistance to LGUs. Celia also is the editor-in-chief of the Philippine Journal of Development, which is PID's multidisciplinary social science journal. Celia, would you be able to turn on your video? While we were waiting for Celia, the third panelist is Dr. Huot Puom. He is the Undersecretary of State at the Ministry of Economy and Finance of Cambodia. Formerly, he was the Deputy Secretary General at General Secretariat of Committee on Economics and Financial Policy. He was also an economist at the ASEAN Plus 3 Macroeconomic Research Office in Singapore. Dr. Pom, would you be able to turn on your video? Last but not the least is an entrepreneur. Ms. Elaine De Velez is the CEO and founder of Front Learners, which is an e-learning content and solution provider to boost student competency and to increase school enrollment. Prior to being the founder of Front Learners, Elaine was also a senior research and development director at Johnson's & Johnson's in Singapore, and also section head for R&D at the Procter & Gamble. Also, if Elaine can also open their video. So let me now call on our esteemed panelists so that they can share their views regarding the report. So the first one I'll call is Thomas. Thomas, aside from giving your comment on the report, one question that I would also want to ask you is, what do you think is the implication of this report on ADB's work to support regional development through digital transformation? Back to you. The floor is yours, Tom.
Great. Thanks, James, and thanks, Sin Young, and thanks for inviting me. Thanks, everybody, for joining. So I think, the report is very interesting. It comes at a very timely point in our development with the COVID pandemic. And I think what we're seeing, obviously, is that we have an acceleration of the digital economy across the region. And I think that the region that we're in is the most dynamic region because it is where all of the new consumers are. So this report is even more important to show the rest of the world, that Asia is growing rapidly and is also rapidly moving into the digital age and starting to take a leadership role in many ways. And I think the report kind of highlights, that we have a rich set of economies that are large and have their own idiosyncrasies and issues, but also their own advantages. And we can learn from each other across the region on how best to address the challenges of the digital economy. And I would say that the first thing, at least from ADB's perspective, is that it is also it has forced us in some cases to take on the digital transformation that we weren't ready for. Nobody was ready for having their kids sitting on Zoom all day long, try to learn. Nobody was expecting to have to get in touch with a doctor on an app or by phone, for important things, and nobody was expecting to work from home so much. But the fact that we're working through these things is really allowing us to work out some of the issues so that when the new normal comes, that these things will be part of the new normal. And I think the big question, it's hard to answer, and the report itself can't just answer this, is how much will we go back to our old ways, and how much will we keep? And I think some of that was answered, with e-commerce. I agree. This is a very important trend. People are now used to using e-commerce, and they will stick with it. But we all know we don't want our kids sitting on Zoom for the rest of their lives. So that one we're going to try to push back to the old way. But I think there are things we can learn from our kids being online, and how can we, use new forms of education more effectively. I think education is one of the biggest challenges that the pandemic has shown and has not solved. But I do think work from home is something that is the big question mark. How many people are going to go back to the office, and how many are going to stay working from home, or, some combination? And I think this could be a big impact, even if it's only, say, 20% of the people who are working from home and some portion of people who are partly working from home, that will reduce traffic and improve people's livelihoods. But that will not show up in our GDP numbers. The GDP of transport spending and people, going out for lunch at the office will go down. And it's going to be kind of interesting to see how our economies can react to that, because people will be better off. But the fact that some jobs will be lost, it might look like a negative, but I think it's going to be a positive. And how we can measure that, and how we can actually take advantage of the time that people are making up, and the savings that they're getting from their not having to go to the office, this is going to be a big deal. I think that's something we have to look at, and it's hard to figure out. And then, in terms of ADB, ADB has recognized for a long time that digitization is the future. We're in a rapidly growing region where the digital economy, all the tech giants are looking at our region for their future growth. And it's going to drive the agenda for development more and more. And that's why ADB has created, my unit, the Digital Technology for Development unit. We've created ADB Ventures. We have a tremendous amount of effort going on within ADB to rise to the challenge of the digital economy. And I think, first of all, we have to look at, the pandemic has put a focus on connectivity. We cannot have 50% of the world unconnected, or 30% of the countries in the study people unconnected. We need to dramatically increase that. And the current investments of the private sector have not been, pushing that as hard as I think it could be. And I think ADB is taking a more active role, and President Massa is talking about this. I think there are a lot of things we can do. And we also have to prepare for our traditional infrastructure investments to be more digital. And that's another thing that people are actively working on, and, using digital tools to monitor projects, and to monitor or assess the impact of projects. These things are happening at scale now, and because we're all working remotely and can't travel, we're forced to do these things. And I think that will stick. So our project, the way we do projects and envision projects, will also somewhat change. And then, we also have to look at, these emerging digital economy jobs, and, what's needed in education, what's needed in the job ecosystems, what's needed for investing in startups, and, how to get the regional economies participating at all levels of the digital economy. I think that's something that ADB will be looking at, and we have, I think, a good ability to contribute across many dimensions. So thanks. Back to you, James.
Thank you, Tom. Indeed, I agree with you. Leadership is very important. The role of Asia in leadership is very important. And true, no, even though eating your ramen at home is safe, I still want to eat ramen, I think, in a nice restaurant, chatting with friends. So I think when this pandemic is over, people will really decide what behavior they'll go back to. No? So the next panelist I would like to call on is Celia Reyes. And Celia, aside from giving your feedback on the report, one question I'd ask you is, when I look at the performance of the Philippines relative to Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, it seems that we're lagging behind. What do you think is the reason for that relatively slower performance of the Philippines? The floor is yours, Celia.
Thank you, James. Perhaps I can ask Carol to share her screen rather than me sharing my screen, if that's possible. First, I'd like to, and I'll just tell you when to move the slides. First, let me allow me to congratulate the team who prepared the report. I think it provides very interesting and useful insights on behavior before, during, and post-pandemic. And okay, while waiting for that, and I think what Nunu has mentioned, I'm glad that he actually showed the main takeaways for the Philippines. Should I try to share my screen, James?
Yes, Carol.
Okay, or Carol. Okay, Carol
There,
will.
there.
Okay, so next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, so these are the main takeaways for the Philippines, and I'll actually just be commenting on a few of the takeaways. This is the key indicators of digital adoption in the Philippines, and as we can see that the Philippines has really been moving towards wider digital adoption. If you can go to the next slide, I think what I'd like to do is to focus on a few of the takeaways, and let me just focus first on the two emerging industries that have been mentioned in the report, which are health tech and ed tech, and they've played a critical role during the pandemic. Let me discuss health tech first. While technology has mainly been used for contact tracing in many countries during the pandemic, there are opportunities to address the issue of access to healthcare. The report noted that access to healthcare is a chronic challenge around the region, and based on World Health Organization data cited in the report, there are 1.2 doctors per 1,000 population in the Philippines. So despite programs intended to attract doctors to practice in rural and less urban areas, many areas are still underserved, and there are areas where even primary care is not available. So telemedicine can lead to wider reach of patients. This will allow patients in remote areas to consult doctors who are in the urban centers. And even for those in the urban centers, telemedicine will enable patients to access specialists that are not readily accessible. So I think this would provide a very good opportunity for medical health workers to interact with specialists from developed countries as well. And this would actually provide opportunities for patients getting the best care. Of course, a framework would have to be established to address liability and coverage concerns to protect both patient and doctor. So I think looking ahead, this is one area that could be that we could foresee to be happening within the next few years. Turning now to the issue of EdTech, as has been mentioned, to protect children, schools were closed in many countries in April, including the Philippines. Since then, many have adopted different modalities for education to continue. Children were not allowed to go to school, and distance learning for basic education has been adopted by the Department of Education, while online and offline modes were offered to tertiary education. Schools reopened on October 5 with distance. We can just go back, Carol. Schools reopened on October 5 with distance learning as the norm, and face-to-face learning remains prohibited until a vaccine becomes available. And in the case of the Philippines, that would probably be second semester of next year. So TV and radio classes supplement printed self-learning modules and online materials. And what we have seen is that with the pandemic, total enrollment in the current school year was only 90% of the enrollment in the previous school year. So the shift in learning modality has proven to be a big challenge for education department, as they have to prepare teaching materials for distance learning in a short period of time. And what I'm showing here now is that access to internet is actually a problem in the Philippines. So we find that the Philippines has the lowest percentage of households with internet access at 17.7%. So this poses a big challenge for distance learning. If you go to the next slide, we also can see that the Philippines has relatively low percentage of households with computer. Again, providing significant challenges for implementing that distance learning modality for education during this time. But I think more importantly, if we go to the next slide, which which hasn't really been discussed, is that the poor tend to have lower access to opportunities that accompany digital technology. So, for instance, the table that I'm sharing with you shows that those households belonging to the richest decile would have about over 60% of them would have access to computers, whereas the poorest decile would only have a very low access of 1.37%. So you can see the digital divide here, and unless this digital divide is addressed, this might worsen the marginalization of already disadvantaged groups and widen educational gaps in the country. So this is something that has to be addressed, this inequality across groups. Now, let me, of course, we haven't also discussed about the readiness of the parents to be able to carry out this distance learning. I think very few parents, particularly in the Philippines, are equipped with the skills to do homeschooling, and now everybody has to participate in the education in the provision of education for their children. I think the third point that I'd like to tackle regarding the report is the issue of talent, because the report highlighted that the internet economy, one of the possible barriers or blockers to this is the issue of talent. Uh, this could be one of the obstacles. Growth of internet sector may be held back due to the shortage of workers with right skills, and therefore there's an urgent need and opportunity to reskill and upskill workers so that they can find jobs in the growing internet sectors. This actually presents a good opportunity for our local workers to tap this market. In the case of other occupations, we have ASEAN mutual recognition arrangements to facilitate mobility of workers across countries. And this is limited to several occupations. I think now we have to consider, and primarily these are actually linked to licenses. But now I think we have to extend this kind of arrangements or competency qualifications beyond traditional professional certification to cover occupations related to emerging fields such as data science and machine learning. And finally, I think I'd like to also mention that related to this issue of talent is the need to protect or to provide social protection to the workers who are actually engaged in this growing sector. And I think as part of the study that has been done together with ADB, it has been pointed out that while we see huge opportunities for workers in the economy, we also need to point out the need to look after the workers. And this pertains to the need for social protection systems for these online workers. And there have been suggestions on how to go about this, including ensuring that social protection coverage is detached from the firm or the job and becomes more portable. So probably I will also show some, as James asked, how come the Philippines has not been performing as well? If we can go to the next slide, there are issues actually with regards to the digital infrastructure. If we could skip that slide. Next slide, please. If we can go to the next slide. Yes, so for instance, internet speeds, are actually very low, relatively low in the Philippines. And in addition, previous slide, the costs are also relatively higher in the Philippines. And if you look at this, okay, we can just look at this slide. If you look at this particular slide, despite having advanced digital technologies out there, digital transformation in the Philippines is still lagging, both in terms of digital infrastructure, human capital, and industry connectivity. Although the government is trying to put in place programs to address some of these gaps. Perhaps I'll stop here, and then probably we can discuss this more during the open forum. James, over to you.
Thank you, Celia. Very interesting presentation, and also starts on the Philippines. I agree. I think telehealth is really critical for our aim to do universal healthcare. And what you pointed out in terms of the digital divide, especially in terms of edtech, is really a critical challenge. So with that, let me call on Elaine, who is the CEO of Front Learners, because that's actually related to education. So Elaine, let me invite you to share your comments. And one question that I would ask you is, what can you share your experience in trying to raise the education access and quality in the Philippines through this blended approach of using online education tools? Elaine? Maris, Elaine still on?
Oh, sorry, I'm not unmute. So thank you,
Okay.
James. And first, I'd like to congratulate the team and thank them for the very comprehensive report. Actually, it validated quantitatively what we have experienced and what we have observed in the past 9 months. So what I would just like to do is perhaps to share our experience and examples to build on what the report said. So true, the pandemic actually accelerated adaptation of e-learning or online learning. Actually, for the past 4 years, which we have been in the market, most of our time and resources were spent on educating the education market on why e-learning, why do you have to transition, what is the benefits, why it will increase competitiveness, why it's good for business. But this year, for the first time, the conversation has shifted to how. Like schools are asking, okay, so how fast can you bring us online? How can we have exams? How can we avoid cheating? How much? So true, the pandemic has shifted the landscape in education. And so what we did is we tried to be a solution to the problems that they encountered and to help them quickly shift from the face-to-face mode of learning or teaching into a digital online learning. So what we offered is a plug-and-play solution because, schools, especially the small and medium-sized schools, they don't have IT departments. And even the big universities, while they have IT departments, only a few have expertise on education technology per se. IT in the Philippines means network infrastructure. It's nothing to do with how can you integrate technology in improving quality of teaching and learning. And so that was the kind of help we were providing in the past 9 months to the different types of schools that we have encountered, inclusive of whether you're a small school, medium-sized, or big school. We're offering our sort of expertise and our knowledge on how education technology can be fully maximized. And of course, affordability is key. This is not a time to increase prices. This is not a time to really capitalize on your knowledge and expertise on education technology to milk the schools. It's a time to help them. We even offer discounts because there are schools who are on the brink of closing on the brink of really continue whether to shut down or remain open, and so really the economics are not good. So this is again a time to provide assistance with whatever we have. The other thing we had to do is to pivot ourselves, because in the past, because of this lack of internet access, and because of the problems on speed on internet, we have resorted to an intranet solution, meaning we have our servers in the school and give them an internet within the perimeters of the school. But because face-to-face is not possible, we have put our solution in the cloud so that everyone, anywhere, can access e-learning. So that was one quick thing we had to adapt ourselves into, like migrate schools and our e-learning into the cloud for easier access. Okay. The other thing I have to say is that e-learning now is not anymore the domain only of schools. We have found ourselves being approached by corporations who have to continue on training, upscaling their staff, and the best way to do it is through e-learning. Other companies who are into like executive coaching also are on the brink of closing down because they cannot anymore reach their customers to their normal classroom training. So they also reached out to us. So it provided an opportunity to expand the pie beyond the school setting as well. Because it's the same platform and it's just a matter of customizing the content to the need of the customer. Okay, so having said that, I am excited on what's next. So the conversation now coming from the why, the how is, so what's next? And I'm very glad that the report mentioned that 8 out of 10 of the new migrants into the digital world find relevance and help on the digital transformation. It has been very helpful, and that 9 will stick to it post-pandemic. And Tom mentioned about what happens now to the type of instruction delivery. Will our kids be sitting in front of the screen and doing like Zooms or webinars forever? I think what happened in the past 9 months is that what we just had is a digital adaptation. What simply happened is that we transferred the classroom from the school to the screen. We have not yet scratched the surface of using technology for a real digital transformation. And when I say digital transformation, it means changing the way we teach. It changes the role of the teacher from a sage in the stage to a guide on the side. Really integrating technology into the pedagogy so that it can really make our learners future ready. So that has not yet happened. And the report mentioned that also, that we have not fully unlocked the potential of digital transformation in education. So let me leave it at that, and maybe I can answer more questions during the panel discussion. James, I think you're on mute.
Yep. Thank you, Elaine. Yes, as I was saying, everybody was really caught surprised in terms of the scale and the speed with which I think the educational system shifted from classroom to online, and the teachers, the students, and all the parents are also struggling in terms of finding their role to support an effective educational setup. Now, let me now call on Pom, who is from Cambodia. Pom, one question I have, aside from your feedback on the report, is I think being a small economy, Cambodia was not included in the report. And I would like to ask you about what's the experience of Cambodia in terms of the use of the digital economy to adapt to this COVID world and to address some of the challenges going forward. Pom?
Okay, thank you so much, James. And first of all, I would like to express my sincere gratitude for James and the ADB team for providing me this opportunity and to give me the opportunity to read very good document. And I can say that this document is really a good reference for us. Even the coverage is only the 6th South Asian country. And you mentioned about the whole South Asia, but I think at least they show us a very good point is about the methodology they have used and the survey of the 6 country about especially the new consumers of the technology, the digital device, and then about their behavior, like during the pandemics and the post pandemic period. That is very important for us. I think at least we can learn from this kind of methodology and maybe we can apply something in Cambodia. So I think the paper is really a very good one, very relevant to us and even good. But I think if they can expand the scope to cover the other 4 countries in the South Asia, should be a good point for us. So we can see how we can position ourselves as a small country like Cambodia into the report. Yeah. So in order to respond to your question, I would like to share, what we have done during the COVID-19 by using the technology as one of the tools that we can survive. We observe almost the same, shift during the pandemics about the digitalization, about the new consumers of the digital devices. We can see very similar trend as mentioned in the report by the ADB team. So what we observe that technology is very important during the pandemic time because we try to avoid the face-to-face meeting. We try to avoid, physical contacts between the demand side and the supply side. And a lot of people start using online, I can say online platform to do their business and to do some other activity. And we can see that a lot of online transactions have been made during the pandemic time. And the good thing that we can observe the digital payment. So I think the report also share, and our colleague Celia, she also mentioned about the numbers of the household using the computers or the device. We can say that the percentage of those households owning this kind of device are still, relatively low compared to some others South Asian country. By the way, the mobile, the telephone, the smartphone, I think still a lot of people use, not up to the 50% of the total population, but I think a good increased number of the people using the device, especially smartphone. And within the smartphone, we can see that people start using a lot of payment by using their smartphone as a digital payment. So the good thing, we try to reuse the cash because usually our economy is considered as a cash economy. But with the pandemics, people use less cash by using their device, the smartphone as one of the tool to pay, from bank account to another one. So this is the good thing that I can see that how people transform or adapt themselves, to the new normal, or can say like during the pandemic time. So this is good thing. Another thing that I can see during the pandemic time when the government decided to close down all the education institution, especially the private and the public school. So every school, small or medium or large school, try to use all the technology in order to ensure that the education will continue. So they use a lot of e-learning. Student and the educational staff, try to adapt themselves to the new system, and all of us try to see what are the pros and cons of the e-learning system, and how much we can benefit during that time, how much we can survive during the peak of the pandemic one. We can observe that there's still a very big gap between those that have the access to the e-learning and those that have not access to the e-learning. I can share with you, like, for students who study at we can say the private school, maybe like a foreign-owned school or domestic-owned school, but they are more private school. They have more facility, so the student more or less can have a better e-learning outcome compared to some other student living in a remote area. So in the remote area, I can see not everyone have the device, even the smartphone. Not everyone have the TV, at the rural area. So even the government try to display a lot of program on the TV for education, but some students, they could not have the access to that kind of system because of the device that they own, and as well as some area they don't have enough the power to kickstart their TV, whatever. So we can see that all these are the challenges that we are facing. Even everything is not smooth enough, everything is not fair between those that have the access and those that does not have access. But I can still see that the digitalization is still very important for us. Try to make sure that we have the different choices for consumers as well as for students. So consumer, we talk about the commerce, we talk about the trade, and then for the student, we talk about the e-learning or distant learning. I think if we provide both sides, more choices to all these people, they will be better off for us. And in terms of policy direction, I would like to share with you that given the pandemic, even before the pandemic, we see that technology is very important. And we can say that if you want to reduce the development gap within the region, South Asia region, I think technology is one of the key tools that can help Cambodia to catch up with the region, because the region is very dynamic, and you can see that some countries are very much advanced compared to us in terms of technology, and almost like 100%, we can say more than 90% or at least 80% of the population have the access to technology, to the devices. So they can be much more advanced. So for us, I think only technology that can give us the shortcut approach to catch up the region. That one of the reasons that the government tried to launch or prepare one policy paper on the digitalization. Digital economy. So digital economy is one of the key agenda for our government going forward, and we try to prepare. So with the reference to the paper that you share with us, this is very helpful. We can look at what you have conducted in the survey, in the report, and to see how Cambodia, position ourselves and what kind of the challenges we are facing. And if we want to develop the digitalization in a full swing in the future, so what kind of preparation should we? How should we be ready for that one? Another thing that I can see, talking about the talent and the skill in the digital technology is very important for us. We have still a gap between Cambodia and the region. And then among the population in Cambodia, we're still here a big gap in terms of talent in the technology. So what we can do is try to make sure that we can use the technology to reduce this kind of gap, and how we can provide a better opportunity for everyone in the country to have the access to the technology and to know how to use it. So if you have more access to the technology, you have more access to the devices, I think the gap will be reduced, and this kind of thing will help us as a country to catch up with the region in the future. So this is how that we can see. And I want to share a little bit what we have done during the pandemic as well, for how we manage the COVID-19. I think technology have helped us a lot during that time. We don't have sophisticated, like contact tracing, like have been applied in some other country in the region, especially in very advanced like Singapore or Thailand or Malaysia. But at least we can create some app that can use in our smartphone, and we can detect the people, especially the traveler who come to Cambodia. But for sure, the traveler come to Cambodia, we limit we give the priority more to the business people, to the investor who have their business in Cambodia and they want to come back, whatever. So the technology really help us. So we have to create, online platform for those that want to apply the sponsorship or apply some other required document. I can say the entry document to Cambodia, beside the health certificate issued by, kind of health institute in the country, whatever. But they can apply everything online. So technology is really helpful for us during the COVID-19. And at the same time, we use the technology, especially the online platform, to give the information, to disseminate information to the population across the country. And I can say that most of the people in the country have been informed because of the technology that can help us. So in short, I can say like the digitalization has helped us in terms of our fight against the COVID-19, can help us to ensure the education for students during the pandemic time, and also can help us to keep our business afloat despite some sector hardly hit by the COVID-19. But at least we can have a better communication and smooth communication among the stakeholders, and we can help them on time. So yeah, really give very good, I can say like a priority to the technology, that this really a very good tool for us for Cambodia to keep our own development and to catch up with the region. Thank you so much, James.
Yes, thank you. Let me ask one set of follow-up questions to our panelists. Thomas, one question I have with you related to digital divide is, given the diversity of the conditions in the region in terms of funding mechanism, maturity of regulatory ecosystem, the availability of digital skills and awareness, what can ADB do to ensure that no one is left behind in terms of this digital transformation? Tom?
Well, thanks, James. And ensuring that is going to be difficult. I think there is always going to be some sort of divide, as the advanced technologies always move ahead, and there's always going to be early adopters. And so I think we want to do is make sure that people have access to the what we consider a basic level of capability, so they're not left behind, but then also allow for new things to be developed that may be adopted, by a smaller number initially. But I think what ADB can do is first support the increase in connectivity access. We know, in the study, 30% of the people do not have access. In the Philippines, it's about 25%. And the remaining people need to have access. And I think that access should be with a smartphone. As was mentioned, that the smartphone is much better for actually giving people access, for in a functional way versus regular phones. And I think what ADB can do is help bridge the gap, because the private sector is mainly investing in places where they can make money. And we know most of the future investments, our work with ITU has shown this, the future investments over the next 5 years will be $200 billion a year by the telcos globally. And most of that is going into 5G rollouts. And 5G is going to help tremendously, but it's not really going to address the digital divide as much, because it's not focused on rural people or lower cost. And I think what we're actually doing work with ITU on some studies for things that might come along that can help. For example, the new satellite systems like Starlink that are coming along, or new low-cost options. We know the Reliance Jio story in India is a very interesting one, because they've rolled out a low-cost network that for the first 6 months was completely free. We're studying that with ITU to understand if that's something that other countries could adopt. We also need to, develop ways, for technology development to be more broadly enhanced across the region. So education, from all the way from elementary school, but especially at the university level, make sure that we can drive people, give people an opportunity to work in the technology industry and make sure each of the countries in the region is not always dependent on just the tech giants and foreign technology, but they can actually be developing and participating at all levels. And ADB, we have ADB Ventures, which is focused on that, basically investing in tech startups where the traditional investments are not being made. ADB Ventures is going into these areas for things that will really impact development, things like fintech and clean tech and inclusive, technologies. So, I think we have our work cut out for us, but we do have a lot of opportunities. Thanks, James.
Thank you, Tom. Celia, one question I would like to ask is, recently Food Panda drivers in the Philippines, I think, have gone on strike because of reduced pay and some irregularities. What do you think should we do to maintain the balance between the power of the tech firms and also the workers in this industry so that they get a fair share?
Yeah, I think for that, what we would want to promote is really the role of collective action. So that means if we could provide more power to both parties, particularly the workers, in terms of providing more information and also providing a platform where they could have they could minimize the exploitation of workers. I think this is the way, this is the direction for that, rather than, I think, moving towards having unions or so. But it's really more providing more information, providing them the platform to be able to engage and negotiate with the providers.
True, they can actually appeal to the consumers of Food Panda. Like I usually order
right.
my lunch from Food Panda. Elaine, a follow-up question to you. As a startup, as a young startup in the edtech sector, what do you think do you need to ensure that you can keep up with the development with the rising demand for online education in the market?
Okay. First, I think in education, I mentioned before that the internal disruption in the school environment has to happen first for us to be able to unleash the fullest benefits of digital transformation. That's one. Now, having said that, from a startup perspective, we are problem solvers, and but the first step is to understand the problem. And so having a strong collaboration between those, let's say, a private sector, a public sector, understanding and telling us what do they need is already half the battle won, because it will minimize, the marketing time. Like, I may end up developing a super duper nice product, but it's something that the private sector or the public sector does not need. Then it's a waste of effort and time. But if from the very beginning we understand what they need, then we will really customize the solution, the cost, the experience, and then you have a ready market. You don't have to go knocking at doors and say, hey, I have a product for you. Would you like to try? It's from day one that you are iterating the perfection of the product. The customer is already part of it. That is what we have been really seeding the idea on to the whole industry, make it more collaborative between the supplier, which is a startup like us, and a customer, which could be, our food manufacturers, clothing manufacturers, or it could be the schools. What is your problem? What solution do you want us to solve for you? And let's work together on that. So I think it's a new approach. I'd rather have it like a demand pull versus a supply push. That is what I want to happen. The second thing I think is, funding. Of course, we need funding, but accelerators play a key role in really buoying up the startup, economy. Meaning, if you fund the accelerator or if we support the accelerators, then it's a multiplier effect, because startups like us, we don't know all the we don't know how to navigate the industry and do everything, because like me, I was a scientist, I was in the corporate world before. I didn't know how to be a startup, but by having joined an accelerator like IdeaSpace, it really helped us understand what has to be done, how to navigate, linking with the industry, linking with government, and giving us connections with, let's say, a venture capitalist who will tell us, what do we look for in a startup. So I think that is another area where funding should go to the accelerator, because just like us, we don't go direct to the students. We're able to help schools by helping the teachers, because once you help the teachers, then you will reach the millions of students. So in the same analogy, I think that is something that has to happen. The other thing is, I guess, the education system, for one, it's a very complex ecosystem. No one can solve the problems or the challenges by himself or herself. So collaboration among all the different sectors is critical. Like, for example, we at Front Learners, we consider ourselves more as a content provider, but content is just probably 1/5 of the major needs or challenges for e-learning to work. Number one, the internet provider has been discussed already. Second, platform provider. These are the likes of, let's say, Canvas, Moodle, B2L. So these are platform providers. And then, of course, there are other content providers like those who provide video streaming, etc. So, we don't want it to be a fragmented solution, but a holistic solution, so that as a whole, we can really serve best our target customer. So I guess those summarizes what startups need in order to be more effective and really provide a value to the economy of the country as a whole.
Thank you, Elaine. Certainly, I think collaboration across the different players is really important, and most importantly is the digital competency of teachers. Pom, just one question, short question, and also if you can provide quick answer, because we only have, I think, around 7 minutes. I know Cambodia has one of the very strong tourism sector, and as you can see from the report, digital tourism has really been affected. What has Cambodia been doing, and how do you plan to use technology to ensure that Cambodia can actually instill recovery in the tourism sector?
Yeah, thank you so much, James. It's a very important question, and you know that tourism sector is the most hit sector by the COVID-19 in Cambodia. So we discussed about this, and at the same time, I just want to say, like, beside the technology that we are going to use to recover the tourism sectors, we also have the master plan in develop. So we changed the approach that we used to have before the pandemics and then during the pandemics. So with the new master plan, we highlight a lot about the importance of the technology and digital technology to help this one. So for example, just a simple one. So how we can serve our customer better when we have the device to avoid like a face-to-face contact. And then how we can organize a kind of like we call it travel bubble, but travel bubble within the country. So especially among the group of the people that we want to tour them in one specific place, how to make sure that they are safe and how to trace them, if anything happen. So the best way that we can use only using the technology that we have. But I can say at the moment, this kind just only the concept that we want to develop, but it's not yet realized, compared to some other country. But in our master plan, we think that technology is the only solution that can boost our tourism back before the world, tourism sectors, well recovered in the near future. Yeah. So these are how we are planning that.
Thank you, Pom. Let me now call on Nono. We have a lot of discussion, but I would like to give Nono a chance to probably also respond and provide his view about some of the topics that were discussed. Nono?
Hi. Oops.
I'll give you probably 2 minutes for a closing statement in terms of what was discussed by the panelists.
Okay. Thank you so much for the opportunity. As I started at the beginning, I think that one of the key elements, and I'm extremely excited about, is the new wave of opportunities that digital bring to us. At the same time, we spoke that the digital will be one of the key centers of the stage, and the technology will help and create opportunities in terms of economics. And also, we talk about the challenge that we face in terms of, and we identified what are the challenges in terms of 6 macro challenge that we spoke about. I think that in terms of overall, there is a great progress, and that progress in terms of the challenge is it's a very great indicator that digital economy will help develop the countries as well. We need to work together. I think that one of the key elements that everyone spoke and ourselves in the report is the talent. I think that element is key to develop a robust ecosystem in terms of digital. And I think that all have, and we will all actually play a part in this transformation. That is the big message that I would like to share.
Thank you. We still have 3 minutes, and I think I'll call on our panelists to have probably 1 minute closing statement before we adjourn. So I'll start with Thomas.
Thank you, James, and thanks everybody. I guess for closing statement, I'll just say, the report is great. People should take a look at it and use it as a resource and follow these trends, because I think this is the inflection point for the digital economy, and everybody needs to incorporate it more into their work programs and watch these trends that are accelerating. And our team is happy to help anybody who has any needs any extra support or whatever. So thanks again for inviting me, and great conversation.
Thomas. Thanks, Celia. Closing statement.
Yeah, as mentioned, also this report would provides us directions for the sector and for the country as well. And so what this suggests is we need to prepare for all of these challenges. And so that gives us enough lead time
Yes.
to cope with it. Thank you.
More work. Thank you, Celia. Elaine?
Yeah, when we put upfront learners, it is under one belief that through e-learning, quality and affordable education can be made accessible to all. And with this pandemic, we are starting to see that truly education can be democratized with the help of technology. That's all.
Thank you. That's a very good. And Pom, last but not least.
Yeah, James, thank you so much. I think the paper is very relevant, and as I mentioned earlier, it's very helpful to us. We can apply the methodology used by the papers. And one more thing, as now we are developing some master plan, and then in terms of digitalization in the future. So I think please allow us to contact you or the ADB team if we need some
Yes.
expertise and some assistance, because this is really one of the key agenda in our government, especially we talk about the post-COVID-19 recovery plan.
Certainly, Pom, we would be happy to help, especially Sinyang's team is actually regional cooperation. So we actually help small countries. So there you go, folks. Some of the big words that I've heard from here, from this webinar: leadership, collaboration, providing menus to customers, doing collective action, being a problem solver. These are all some of the things that we need to make sure that this digital transformation will contribute to the benefit of all. So till next time, thank you for staying tuned on RCI Pod. Thank you. Thank you, Sale. Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Nono.
everybody.
Very nice presentation, guys.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, have a good day. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carol. Thanks also to the team.